This is Keely. She's from National University of Singapore, and her talk is a post-suppositional account of associative plurals in Burmese.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Right, so colloquial Burmese has two plural morphemes, general plural tue or tue, and the associative plural to or do. The voicing of the first consonant depends on the phonological environment. Both plurals introduce multiplicity requirements, meaning that the referent of the DP consists of more than one individual. So in one, we see an example of the general plural tue, su ga saya tue go tue gere. Su teacher tue met. This is translated as Su met teachers. One requires that Su met at least two teachers. Two is an example of the associative plural do. Su ga sa do go tue gere. Su sa do met. This is translated by speakers as something like Su met Sa and her associates. And it requires that Su met Sa and that Su met at least one of Sa's associates. Notice that even though both plurals do end up giving us multiplicity inference, the source of the multiplicity inference in each case might be different. So in particular, notice that just satisfying the entailments listed in 2 necessarily already guarantees multiplicity. Now consider the conjunction of tue general plurals in 3. Su, teacher tue, and student tue met. This is translated as Su met teachers and students. Since there's plural morphology on plural morpheme to require at least 2 individuals, and that's right. So 3 is most natural and felicitous in a context where there are at least 2 teachers and 2 students that Su met, right? But however, just like the English translation, Su met teachers and students, 3 is at best unnatural or odd in a case where there are 2 individuals who happen to be both teachers and students at the same time. Right? Today, I am interested in the precise semantics of the Burmese associative plural do, particularly motivated by data like 4. Su, Sa do, and Ang do met. This means roughly that Su met Sa and her associates and Ang and his associates. What is interesting is that, so unsurprisingly, 4 is felicitous in a context where there are 4 individuals, Sa and at least one of her associates, and Ang and at least one of his associates. What is interesting is that that is not what is required. 4 is also acceptable and natural in a context where Su only met 2 individuals, namely Sa and Ang, in a setup where Sa and Ang are in a contextually salient social relationship. So in other words, 4 does not seem to require that Su met any other unnamed associates. This is the main puzzle that I attempt to explain in my talk today. Here's a sketch of the proposal I will make. We'll claim that intuitively, Sa and Ang can satisfy each other's associative requirements because they are each other's associates. In order to do that, the interpretation of the associative plural has to be delayed somehow. And so formally, I modeled those requirements that the referent contain an associate as a post-supposition. 5 is the sketch of what that would look like for a plural conjunction with the associative plural. So a sentence like Su met Sa do Ang do has 2 components of meaning. The primary meaning is first evaluated. The primary meaning is that Su met Sa and possibly her associates, and Ang and possibly his associates. The primary meaning first updates the context, and after the sentence is uttered, the post-supposition is then checked. The post-suppositional check is that Su met at least one of Sa's associates, and Su met at least one of Ang's associates. At the time of evaluation of the post-suppositions, the context has already been changed by the primary meaning. And therefore, this is how Aung can be counted as Su's associate and Su can be counted as Aung's associate. Here's an outline of the talk. I first offer some background on Burmese and I address the interpretation of bare nominals and bare plurals. After that, motivated by data from plural conjunctions, I propose a post-suppositional account for the meaning of the associative plural. Following that, I will present further details on the proposal, including questions about the exact timing of evaluation of the post-supposition. And then I'll conclude. To begin, Burmese is a head final language with default SOV word order and nominative accusative case alignment. Case drop is optional and not correlated with definiteness or animacy of the NP. Just a note on methodology, all uncredited data presented come from original fieldwork with 3 native speakers of Burmese. Now, Burmese nouns with quantifiers, Burmese nouns without quantifiers of plural marking denote singular reference. At last year's TripleA, Lim and Early showed this using an example in 6. Imagine that you and Mau Mau are at Hlahla's house. Hlahla has one dog who's playing with Mau Mau. You tell Hlahla, dog, Mau Mau like, right? The bare noun here is appropriate, referring to the contextually salient one dog. Tweaking the example slightly to make it 4 dogs in the context, you see in 7 that the bare noun is now not appropriate. You need a plural marker to refer to multiple dogs. So as introduced earlier, Tui is the general plural morpheme in colloquial Burmese. So Su teacher Tui met is translated as Su met teachers, entailing that Su met at least 2 teachers. A plural phrase with Tui has a multiplicity inference, meaning that the referent contains more than 1 atom. The referent of n Tui must also be a sum of multiple n atoms. Burmese also has an associative plural marker, which is To. In a reference grammar, Yenny and Nintun introduced that To indicates Yenny and Nintun note that To indicates that the referent is accompanied by people belonging to the noun without being of the same kind. These expressions contrast with Sayatui, where all referents are teachers. I illustrate this in a complete sentence in 9. Su teacher To met can mean that Su met multiple teachers or that Su met at least 1 teacher and their associates. Associative plurals are thus set to allow a non-uniform plural referent. Cross-linguistically, a distinctive feature of associative plurals is its ability to have proper names as hosts. This is also possible with To. The referent of Su To is non-uniform, right? It includes Su and other people associated with Su in some social way, for example, her family, friends, or co-workers. Now, whereas the general plural has no restriction, has no animacy restriction on its nominal host, the associative plural To is restricted to animate nouns. So, for example, you can't say apple To. Here's a quick summary for the properties discussed. For inanimate common nouns, you can use Tui but not To. For animate common nouns, both are fine. For proper names, only To is possible. Now, quick note here about the data. For ease of comparison, most of the examples I show today have the relevant plural constructions in object position. In my MA thesis, I show that the same pattern holds in subject position. Now, let me take a moment to talk about the semantics of the general plural Tui and give you a quick proposal for that, which is quite simple, really. And then I'll move on to the semantics of the associative plural Tu, which is really the core question of this talk. The properties we have seen so far for the general plural Tui are unsurprising against the backdrop of plural morphology cross-linguistically. And so I claim that the semantics of the general plural tue follows what has been proposed for bare plurals in English and other languages. Under these accounts, bare plurals are number neutral, and the multiplicity inference that we observe in many contexts is a result of conversational implicature. Part of the motivation for this is that bare plurals don't have a multiplicity inference in downward entailing context. So if you say that police officers didn't come yesterday in English, right, this entails that 0 police officers came. It does not entail that fewer than 2 police officers came, which is what you might expect from logical negation over a plural referent. This can also be shown for conditionals as in 11b. Now, just like English plurals, it can be shown that tue, the general plural in Burmese, has no multiplicity inference under local negation. So consider a context where Sue just returned from the mall. Sue's mother tells her that there was a crime at the mall. If Sue says, I, police tue, didn't meet, right, she means that she met 0 police officers. This cannot be true as long as she meets 1 police officer. So likewise, tue has no multiplicity inference in a conditional clause. So if you say something like, if Sue meets teacher, tue she'll be happy. This means that if Sue meets just 1 teacher, she'll be happy, right? All of this supports the view that tue allows both atomic and plural reference, but in many cases gives an implicature that is non-atomic, just like with English bare plurals. So this is the simple analysis for the general plural tue, whose behavior is unsurprising, right? The focus for the rest of the talk is really the associative plural tue. Right, so an important data point for the precise semantics of tue comes from the interpretation of plural phrase conjunction as shown in 14. So Sue, teacher tue, and student tue met. The overt conjunction is optional, and most of the time, speakers prefer to drop it. As we saw earlier in the introduction, 14 is a natural utterance where Sue met 2 teachers and 2 students, with some expectation that those teachers and those students don't entirely overlap. The conjunction phrase is also possible with associative plural tue. Su, Tlatla tue, and ang tue met is true in a context where Su met Tlatla and her associates and ang and his associates. As pointed out above, right, 15 entails that Su met at least 2 people, Tlatla and ang. It does not require that Su met any unnamed associates. So to restate the puzzle here, teacher tue, student tue is unnatural or odd for just 2 people, even if they happen to be both teachers and students at the same time. However, Tlatla tue, ang tue, right, is natural for just 2 people, namely Tlatla and ang, as long as they are in a contextually salient relationship. For example, with their friends or co-workers and so on. I call this the internal plural reading, right? The intuition being that the multiplicity inferences of the plural expressions are satisfied internally by the named individuals. Okay, to account for the internal plural reading, I propose that X denotes at least X with a post-suppositional check that its referent includes at least 1 associate of X. So what exactly are post-suppositions? Post-suppositions are tests on the output context evaluated after updating with the primary meaning of the sentence. To illustrate, let's look at an example from Brazovianu and Saboji 2013. So Brazovianu and Saboji 2013 make the observation that the Japanese additive focus particle mo normally gives rise to an additive requirement similar to English also or true. So Taro mo ren has the requirement that someone other than Taro ren in 16 here. However, a conjunction with the mo phrases in 17 does not have the requirement that someone other than Taro and Hanako ran away. So Taro mo, Hanako mo ran can just mean Taro as well as Hanako ran away. Similar patterns have also been observed in Hungarian, Hebrew, Romanian, and Russian, just to name a few. Now, Brazovianu and Sabochi proposed that the additive requirement of mo is post-suppositional. So Taro and Hanako satisfy the requirements on each other's mo's. They give a detailed formal account in their paper, but I will just sketch the intuition here using paraphrases in the style of Kuhn, where post-suppositional contributions are indicated with underline. 18 here corresponds to the first sentence we saw in the previous slide, that Taro mo ran away. In this sentence, Taro ran away is first asserted and added to the context. Then later, there is a post-suppositional additive requirement that someone other than Taro ran away. In this example, the additive requirement of mo is not satisfied by the primary meaning itself. Therefore, it behaves as not an issue requirement on the input context, leading to an apparent presupposition. Now, 19 here corresponds to the mo conjunction data we saw in the previous slide. Taro mo, Hanako mo ran away. In this case, Taro and Hanako ran away. In this case, Taro and Hanako ran away is first asserted, and it updates the context. And then later, there is a post-suppositional check that someone other than Taro ran away and someone other than Hanako ran away. In 19, after updating the context with the primary meaning, the result is that the context now satisfies the post-suppositions, regardless of the input context. And that's why the sentence is felicitous, even if just Taro and Hanako ran away. Now that we have an idea of what post-suppositions are, I will get into my own proposal. Formally, my proposal will refer to two different notions of association sets, asoc and aset. First, I define the notion asoc as a function from an individual to the set of individuals standing in a contextually salient relationship to it. So examples of contextually salient social relationships can be family members, friends, co-workers, and so on. For a more detailed formalism of this, I'll refer you to Ryan Smith's 2020 dissertation, but essentially the asoc of Lala, for example, would be the set of her associates. For example, Aung and Mau Mau, and so on. Note that asoc Lala excludes Lala herself, since one is not considered to be in a relationship with oneself. Now, the second notion of association set I'll introduce is Smith's 2020's notion of associate set, A set. So under this definition, for any Z, A set Z is built by taking the individuals in asoc Z and summing them with Z itself, and then closing it further under sum formation. This is something that Smith calls a mereological mixture. This means that the A set of Lala minimally contains Lala and possibly includes at least one of her associates. Okay. And now here's the proposal using these two notions of association sets. So let's take, for example, the sentence Lala to came. To has two components of meaning. The primary meaning is that there exists some X for which X is a member in the A set of Lala such that X came. Recall that A set is the one that contains Lala herself and her sums with her associates, right? So this is the primary meaning that first updates the context. After this manipulation to the context, a second component of meaning is now evaluated. It is delayed because it is a post-supposition, and the content of this post-supposition is that there exists some Y for which Y is a member of asoc Lala such that Y came. Recall that asoc is the one that does not include Lala. It includes atomic individuals who are Lala's associates. To paraphrase this intuitively, the primary meaning is that Lala and possibly her associates came, And then later, there is a post-suppositional check that at least one of Thla's associates came. The primary meaning here does not itself entail satisfaction of the post-supposition. This is because, again, the A set of Thla also includes just Thla herself, right? And so the primary meaning and post-supposition together require that Thla and at least one associate came. Now let's turn to the conjunction case, taking, for example, Thla do and Ang do came. The primary meaning is this. Setting aside details about how conjunction composes, the result here is that there is an X that is the sum of a member of A set Thla and a member of A set Ang, such that X came. Here, I represent this with a sum marker being applied pointwise to these sets. The post-suppositions are that some member of asoc Thla came and some member of asoc Ang came. Again, recall that asoc is the one that consists of atomic individual associates. Paraphrasing, the primary meaning is that Thla and possibly her associates and Ang and possibly his associates came. And the post-suppositions are that at least one of Thla's associates came and at least one of Ang's associates came. This analysis makes it possible that as long as Thla and Ang are in a relevant social relationship, Ang can be the associate of Thla, satisfying the post-suppositional requirement of Thla do, and vice versa, right? And this is possible because the associative requirements are evaluated after the primary meaning of the sentence. So Charlo and Kuhn have recently developed the idea that there is a typology of post-suppositions that all share the characteristic of being delayed. They point out that some post-suppositions indeed have requirements that behave like presuppositions. So Japanese additive particles are exactly an example of these, right? At the same time, there are other things that have been proposed to be post-suppositions, but they introduce meanings which then become part of the at-issue meaning. This includes proposals for modifiers, modified numerals, and sentence internal same. I claim that the meaning of Burmese do belongs in this second category of post-suppositions that contribute to the at-issue meaning of a sentence. The at-issueness of the meaning of do can be shown by having it in a conditional. So what happens is that the post-suppositional requirement of do, and therefore its multiplicity inference, becomes part of the at-issue meaning of the conditional. So if you say something like, if Sue meets Thla do, she'll be happy, this means that if Sue meets Thla and her associates, she'll be happy. In the case that Sue only meets Thla, Sue is not guaranteed to be happy. And also in the case that Sue only meets Thla's associates, she's also not guaranteed to be happy. Right, so I've said that the interpretation of the associative requirement is delayed to some point later, but you might be wondering exactly how late this is and what is the precise timing of the evaluation of the post-suppositional meaning. I suggest that the post-supposition can be delayed, but not too much. I argue that the post-supposition has to be evaluated at the minimal clausal projection containing X do. So how do we know this? Because there is no internal plural reading in the conjunction of little VPs and TPs. I'm going to show you what I mean. So first, there is no internal plural reading that arising between plural DPs of different VP conjunctions. So in Burmese, VP conjunction is achieved using the particle P at the end of the first VP conjunct. So in example 26, Su Thla do met, P Ang do met. This is a VP conjunction construction, which is translated as Su met Thla and her associates and met Ang and his associates, roughly, right? 26 is infelicitous if Su met only Thla and Ang, even if they're a couple, for example, right? And in other words, there is no internal plural reading that arises between Thla do in the first conjunct and Ang do in the second conjunct. Now, the same thing is true in TP conjunction. There is no internal plural reading between plurals of different TP conjuncts. TP conjunction in Burmese has the option of either using be or the sentence final mood there as a strategy for conjunction. So su hla to met there or be su ang to met means that su met ang and his associates and su met hla and her associates. Again, this is infelicitous if Su only met Ang and Hla, even if they're a couple. And so there is no internal plural reading between Hla To in the first TP conjunct and Ang To in the second TP conjunct. So VP and TP conjunction contrast with the availability of internal plural reading let me say that again. VP and TP conjunction contrasts with the availability of internal plural reading with TP conjunction as I've shown throughout the talk. So repeated from above, 28 here has the internal plural reading between Hla To and Ang To in DP conjunction, right? All in all, I've shown that the internal plural reading is possible between two ex-to phrases in DP conjunction, but not in VP conjunction and TP conjunction. If there was an option to delay the evaluation further than the entire TPH or the entire CPH or even higher, we would imagine that the internal plural reading might be available across VP and TP conjunction, right? Since that isn't the case, I propose that this must be because the post-supposition of to has to be evaluated at the minimal clause projection, so either little VP or TP. The post-supposition can be delayed, but just by a tiny bit. Now, given the parallels between my own proposal and the proposal of Brazoviano and Saboji for Japanese additive particles, you want to know if Burmese associative to is in fact an additive particle like Japanese mo. I'm going to show you 3 data points to convince you that to is a plural marker rather than an additive particle. Evidence number 1 comes from plural subject agreement. Burmese has optional subject plural agreement using the particle ja. Ja agrees with ex to as shown in 29, and ja indicates that the referent of ex to is plural. Now compare this to the behavior of a singular with the Burmese additive particle le. To make this natural, imagine someone says, Hla came. 30A can be followed up with teacher le came, but not with teacher. Sorry, 30A can be followed up with teacher le came, but not with teacher le came ja. The second piece of evidence comes from collective predication. So as you can see in 31, ex to can be the argument of the collective predicate meet. However, a singular with le cannot be the argument of a collective predicate. So in 32, if someone says Ang and Su will meet in school, the follow-up cannot be that Hla also met at school. One final piece of evidence comes from reciprocals. So ex to can be the antecedent of the reciprocal chin chin, but not ex le, right? So you can say student to are talking to each other, but not student le are talking to each other. I'll just note here that the formulation of the post-supposition I proposed above doesn't quite work with for collective predicates. The proposal will have to be modified slightly in order to make it work. So summing up, in this talk, I have proposed that a plural DP ex to has 2 components of at issue meaning. The primary meaning denotes X and possible associate of X, and the post-supposition checks that the referent includes at least 1 associate of X. I've shown that the motivation to delay the interpretation of to in such a way comes from what I call the internal plural reading of conjunctions of DPs formed with to. Furthermore, I argued that the post-supposition has to be evaluated at the minimal clause projection containing ex to. A major question arises regarding whether associative plurals across languages are necessarily post-suppositional. Well, at least one data point from Japanese suggests that that's not always the case, that associative plurals are post-suppositional. So considering the Japanese minimal pair with the Burmese data here in 35, Taro, Tachi, and Hanako Tachi came. This means that Taro, Hanako, and their associates came, and 35 would be false if only Taro and Hanako came, even if they are associates of each other. Interestingly, however, I'm aware of one case where the internal plural reading also seems to be attested. This comes from Inuktitut, and this is observed in a handout by Michelle Yuan. Inuktitut has an associative plural ku, and the DP can be marked by either a dual or a plural. So in 36A, Monica associative with a dual marker means that Monica and at least one other person are walking. If the form of the case marker is plural, as in 36B, then there are other people walking besides Monica, right? Now here's the exciting part. Yuan documents that the plural conjunction with ku with dual morphology must refer specifically to just two individuals. So Monica associative dual, Ruth associative dual must refer specifically to just Monica and Ruth. And with this dual morphology here, we know that the whole combination has to be two people, the named individuals and no one else. With the plural morphology in 37A, the plural expression can refer to just Monica, Ruth, and Susan. So in other words, this is the internal plural reading that is available in Burmese, but not in Japanese. Of course, there's much more work to be done for Inuktitut, including understanding the interpretation of full associative plurals in VP or TP conjunction. And so in closing, further detailed work on the interpretation of conjunctions with associative plurals in different languages will help us better understand the possible variation in the meaning of associative plural and the grammar of post-suppositional meanings. And that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I see Vera has a question.
Thank you, Mitchell, for interpreting that gesture correctly. Great talk and great data. I have a quick data question and then one question regarding the formal implementation. So I assume that these two plural markers can co-occur, right? And that you've checked that they're not in complementary distribution. So you can't have do and dwe in one.
No, yes, they are in complementary distribution. Well, I don't know. I don't think I've checked this explicitly, but that's what I would guess.
It would, I think, it again also be additional evidence that they are the same type of creature and that one is not some sort of additive particle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that would be fairly easy to elicit. The second question is related in that, of course, I was like, this is clearly an additive particle, right? So you had some good data, but I'm wondering, in your current analysis, you have existential quantification in there, right? So there is one element in the set of associates that satisfies the this other thing, but couldn't it be anaphoric? Is this something you've looked at, whether there has to, like, also thinking of a difference in presupposition, right? Is it enough to existentially quantify over the associates, or does there have to be an explicit associate referent in the context? So it's yeah, just as an alternative to the existential quantifier in there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. Yeah, I hope the question was clear enough. So in a way, thinking of Judith Thunhauser's work on additives and their presuppositions, how good is this thing out of the blue when no explicit associate has been established in the context?
Yeah. So yeah, okay. So for sure, there has to be this has to be something in a discourse that that sets up that it's clear that there are associates of the named individual. That is clear. And yeah, it will be infelicitous out of the blue. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So in a way, the existential might not capture that to the degree.
I see.
So would be interesting to play around with that. And related, one could think about generating then these associates via focus alternatives if they have to be established in the context. But just something to think about and look at the data. Yeah. Thank you again for a talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Louisa.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really interesting. I was wondering about negation. So I imagine that you predict that those post-suppositions will be under the scope of negation, so they'll be negated. So, but I guess that's a prediction that you need to confirm. And the other question is, assuming you can tell how high or low negation is in Burmese, you could use that as an argument that the timing of evaluation has to be quick as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. So I'm sharing my screen again because I do have some data for negation prepared. So the reason why I didn't present it is because yeah, it's unclear the height of the negation, and I suspect that is interfering with the results that I get when I test the associative plural under negation. So for example, here is an example with clause on, so local negation, right? So when you say, I didn't meet Aung Do, right? This is true if Su met, if the speaker, right, met Aung and his parents, and false if the speaker met only Aung and not his parents, and also false if Su met only Aung's parents and not Aung, right? So the negation here is really scoping above negation, and this can be understood fairly straightforwardly if we just assume that negation is rather low in the clause, right? And so yeah, but then so let's see. So I also have some data in biclausal negation, right? So this is a rather long context, so I'm going to bring you through this slowly. But so imagine in a context where Su just returned from the mall, and Su's mother, right, mistakenly hears from Tata that Su met Aung and his parents at the mall, right? So if Su's mother says, Su's mother says, Tata said that, right, embedded, you met Aung Do, right? Su can reply, right? Su can reply to say, I didn't say that I met Aung Do, right? Okay, so this is Aung Do in a embedded, right, under a say higher clause, right? And so this can be followed up with, I only met Aung's parents, right? And in this way, maybe it is easier to understand, right? So in this case, the Su Do, the associative plural, right, is interpreted within local negation, which is expected. The only trouble here, the only difficulty here is that if you do follow up with I only met Aung, right, as a follow-up to Su's first utterance there, then some speakers find it not so felicitous. And so, right, what I think what we learn here is that even though the way I present it is that the primary meaning and the postsuppositions together, right, can easily be evaluated, right, together, and then checked later, right? Maybe there is some asymmetry in these meanings. Maybe the primary meaning is not exactly the same status as the postsuppositions, right? And that's why we are getting this behavior over here. But yeah, this was the data for negation. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so it is about 8:20, almost 8:20, but the break coming up. So, but if you want to ask a short question, Alta, would you like to go?
Yes, thank you. It's a short question, it's a data question. It's about these NP conjunctions, you know, these la, do, do. And I was wondering, you didn't show the data, whether this is like the normal way of expressing NP conjunctions, or whether you could also have this without the do, just la and an. And then if that is so, is it in principle possible to spell out the set of associates after the do? So say la, do, colleagues. And I guess that's what you would predict at the moment, right? And so I mean, assuming that this associate function is not symmetric and not bijective, I guess this is what you would expect, right? You're just saying, is that possible in Burmese?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't have the data now, but yeah, I think that's the right prediction. Yeah, but that's worth checking. Yeah, thank you.
Great talk. So yeah, I would just encourage you to keep up this great work. And it's great to see all these new languages coming into TripleA. So it's very gratifying.
Thank you so much.